On today's video, we're going to answer a big old question: which tier of troops you should use in which scenarios in Rise of Kingdoms. Are tier 5s required? When are tier 4s better than tier 5s? When should you train each type of troop? When should you use them? And how you can maximize your efficiency to have all the troops you need to get every type of event done and not have to worry about it. Have a nice and awesome war with awesome results and everything along the way. So sit back, slap a like on the video. Hey there YouTube, welcome back to Gekko Gaming. Today we're back to the tiers of troops video because we've talked about this in the past. It seems that we need to revisit this subject every now and then to kind of illustrate once more the importance of using tier 4s and tier 5s in specific scenarios and how you can maximize your efficiency and not have to spend a stupendous amount of money as well as resources to maintain yourself an active player in Rise of Kingdoms. Before we start though, I'm a sponsored content creator of Rise of Kingdoms. Enjoy the content, slap a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get a notification every time I upload a new video, and of course, don't forget to, join our Discord maybe. 66% of you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. A huge influx of viewership is here. Welcome to all of you new viewers. I hope to earn your subscription today. Let's set some base information out before we go into scenarios and when you should use which types of troops. First and foremost, in this video, we're going to talk in numbers when it comes to cavalry. However, it doesn't matter which type of troop you use, infantry, archers, cavalry, or siege. The numbers are all going to be pretty much the same. Everywhere you need to use food, it's the same amount of food per troop, same amount of stone, same amount of wood, same amount of gold. So all the ratios are the same. We're just going to illustrate the numbers when it comes to cavalry. The second thing you need to know is that troops are a combination of resources and speed and time, essentially. You take resources, you wait some time, troops are created. The higher tier troops you create, the more expensive it is in terms of time and of resources, but the higher type of troops also have bigger stats, bigger attack, bigger defense, bigger health. We'll look at that momentarily in more detail. The final thing you should remember is that troops have 3 potential statuses when it comes to fighting. Slightly wounded means the troops are inactive for said battle, but once the battle is done and your march is back home, those troops are instantly available to battle again. Severely wounded are troops that went to your hospital, and now you need to spend resources and wait some time to heal those back up to make them useful yet again. And of course, dead troops are troops that are no longer being used. You cannot use them again. They're gone. They up your dead count and lower your troop count, and that's it. Never regainable. When it comes to fighting on the field, there are many different scenarios in which you are going to end up with either of the 3 statuses. Open field, for example, guarantees the worst your troops will get are severely wounded, unless of course your hospital is full, in which case they die off. When you're rallying targets, cities, garrisons, forts, whatever it is you're rallying, you will potentially get yourself a good amount of dead troops as part of that set activity, regardless of your hospitals. And so you need to figure out a balance between the cost of training, the cost of maintaining, and the results you get out of the troops you are using in said scenarios. Let's give you a few examples of scenarios to kind of illustrate what we're talking about. If you're someone who has a lot of farms and you have unlimited resources, and on top of that, you spend a decent amount of money, you have the speed ups you need. Tier 5s are honestly your friends. They'll give you the best bang in terms of the highest stats, the most kills, the most deaths, and all that good stuff. But in return, they will cost you a huge amount more to train and heal. Most players are not able to sustain full tier 5s. As a matter of fact, us content creators kind of screw you guys over when it comes to that, because someone like Chisco, Dragothian Legend, Ronnie, even myself and Shinchi as well, and many other creators fight strictly with tier 5s because these creators also spend a substantial amount of money as well as have a substantial system in place to have all the resources and speed ups they need to sustain tier 5s for that long of a term, for those big of quantities. Some of the content creators have not dropped over below 100 million power, all with tier 5s, and when they do, they push back up. All of these things are very costly, and The content creators kind of make it look like it's a standard, but it really isn't something that you need to do. And I'm at fault for that as well. So that's something that I've been changing as of last KVK. If we look at costs for a bit, troops cost a stupendous amount more to heal when it comes to tier 5s than tier 4s. For example, one tier 5 will cost you 300, and this is strictly cavalry, will cost you 320 food to heal. We can go in here really quickly and look at that right there. It'll cost you 320 food to heal, 240 stone, and 160 gold. One tier 5 worth of healing. If you go look at tier 4s on the other hand, the build looks very, 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 very much cheaper. As a matter of fact, it's almost a third cheaper when it comes to stone and food, and it's 1/20th the cost when it comes to gold to heal tier 4s. Gold is the most scarce resource in the game. It's tough to get, and it's going to cost you a good amount of money and good amount of time in gathering to get all the gold you need to sustain tier 5s long term. So here is, after all of that, what I think you should be doing when it comes to fighting, training, and all that good stuff. When it comes to training tier 4s and tier 5s, your daily training should be tier 4s. There's absolutely no reason for you to train tier 5s on a day-to-day basis. The reason for that is it's simply very expensive and you don't really need tier 5s. You'll see why I mean that momentarily. But I train on the day-to-day tier 4s unless I am doing a certain event. When it comes to Mightiest Governor events, for example, if you're someone who is competing for a Mightiest Governor placement, tier 5s are pretty much your best friend. The way Inorganic Tony made it this far and Killer Johnson and Sir Opium made it this far is not by training tier 4s, but rather training tier 5s. The reason for that is because in training events, more often than not, you get a substantial amount more points for training tier 5s than you get tier 4s. It's 2.5 times more points. And so it is much, much, much faster and better in terms of the event to train the highest tiers of troops to get the points. So in any event that you get points based on the tiers of troops you train, and there's a lot more points for tier 5s than tier 4s, you're always better off training tier 5s. When I train tier 5s, I only train tier 5s during Mightiest Governors, where I am competing to end up somewhere within top 10 or top 20 or something like that. I also only train tier 5s during events that are, again, points-based and not time-based. That's the only time I train tier 5s. On the day-to-day, you train tier 4s, and you also train tier 4s on events that are speed-up use events and not point use events. So when it comes down to the cost of training tier 4s versus tier 5s, and we can really quickly go train up our tier 4s, you can see that it'll cost you about, for 2,000 tier 4s, you're going to spend about a day and 2 hours. For 2,000 tier 5s, you have 14 extra hours here. If we go down to tier 3s right here, you'll see we have a difference, a very, very small difference of about 6 hours in between these two, and a huge amount in here. The differences in the training times are kind of exponential to an extent. If this is 5 hours worth of training is a tier 1 unit, training tier 2s is the equivalent of 2 training units. Training tier 3s is the equivalent of 4 training units. Training tier 4s is the equivalent of 5 training units. And training tier 5s is, I believe, the equivalent of 7 or 8 training units. And that we're talking 5 hours being 1 training unit. That's about 7.5-ish hours, training units, give or take. So the difference in terms of time that you're going to spend in between tier 4s and tier 5s is fairly small, but the amount of resources you're going to be spending is stupendously bigger. We're talking almost 3 times as much in terms of food and stone, and 20 times as much in terms of gold. So when it comes to training, spending time, The cheapest way for you to spend time is training tier 4s. You need the least amount of resources and the most amount of time to get tier 4s unlocked. Tier 5s are less amount of time overall per se, but a ton more of resources. It costs you more time for one. Obviously, it'll cost you more time for one tier 5 than a tier 4, but you get the point. You get a higher return on more return in one unit that costs more time. Essentially, this one tier 5 is going to do, I believe, 30% more damage than a tier 4 does. Just to give you a little bit of context on how much of a difference there is between these two guys, right? It's like a 30-25% difference between these two types of troops. But when it comes to training, there's absolutely no reason for you to train tier 5s unless you're getting something out of it beyond just the troops, which is winning events or helping your kingdom gain points for a kingdom event for that matter. That's when you should be training tier 5s. The rest of the time, tier 4s, speed up use events, tier 4s. Why? Because when you use tier 4s, the bottom line is healing tier 4s will cost you much less speed ups and much less resources. If you're going to be sustaining a 2, 3, 4 day fight, healing tier 5s is going to be stupendously expensive. And let me give you some numbers just to give you a little bit of an idea. Healing 1 million tier 5s will cost you 320 million food, 240 million stone, and 160 million gold. Just so you get a little bit of context what that means, training 1 million tier 4s, training 1 million tier 4s is cheaper than healing 1 million tier 5s by a lot. That's how crazy it is. You can train a full set of new tier 4s at the same cost that it costs you to heal a same use of tier 5 sets. So when it comes to severely wounded and when it comes to deads, you always want to prioritize tier 4s over tier 5s. Tier 5s are meant for two different scenarios. Tier 5s are meant for when you're leading rallies or leading garrisons, and they're meant for Ark of Osiris. Why Ark of Osiris? You don't lose any troops. All your severely woundeds become instantly healed up at the end of the event, but you cannot do Ark of Osiris at a high level with tier 4s. You must have tier 5s to do good in Ark. You also must have tier 5s to do good in a lot of other events in Rise of Kingdoms. If you're hunting keeps, if you're doing Karak, if you're doing any other events that require you to use troops, even for anything that requires troops, the higher the tier troops you have, the better you are. But when it comes to war, you don't necessarily need to have the best tier of troops. What you do need to have is the commanders and the field presence consistently. If you're someone who has enough speed ups and enough resources to sustain a tier 4 war, there shouldn't be a reason on earth for you to sacrifice all your resources and all your speed ups on re-healing the same types of troops. Troops are meant to die, and that is a statement that a lot of people say but don't truly understand what it means. Troops are meant to die doesn't mean that all your troops need to die. It means that you need to have troops that you are designated as troops that are going to die. Not all your troops have to die for you to be a successful Rise of Kingdoms player or for you to play an insane KVK. But what you do need to have is you do need to have troops that have died. I have lost a good amount of 300-400k tier 4s, tier 5s in the process of fighting KVK because I was leading rallies, and so the deads that I got was from leading rallies. But I also lost 400 plus tier 4s on fighting joining rallies, garrisoning stuff, fighting in the open field, and hospitals fill-in, among other things. The bottom line is tier 4s are the best thing you can use on the open field as well as to fill rallies. Tier 5s are what you're going to use for Ark of Osiris and for leading rallies as well as garrisoning, and that is because you want the leading rally march as well as the garrison captain to have the best most types of troops in there, the best tier of troop in there, so that march lasts longer. That's essentially why leaders need to be tier 5s. But if you're a filler and if you're an open field fighter, there's absolutely no reason to have to sustain tier 5 losses. I've seen time and time again tier 4s trading positively with tier 5s if you know what you're doing. There's one more thing you should know before we end this video. Kingsland in KVK is a matter of a day or two when it comes to Rise of Kingdoms, which is an unfortunate fact. It's an unfortunate fact. The amount of fighting you do in Kingsland is limited to less than 72 hours, less than 24 hours worth of fighting total in a KVK, give or take. But Osiris League is something that can last you every single weekend for 2-3 months if you go deep into the league. Tier 5s are going to be needed every single week for you to be competitive in Arc. But for those 72 hours worth of fighting in Kingsland, you should not be giving away your Arc troops. My personal opinion is get yourself as many tier 5s as you can, and those tier 5s will be there to help you in Arc and to garrison and to be the troops in your city in case you get rallied. Those are the troops that you send rallies with, and occasionally you go garrison with as well. But the troops that are meant to die in Rise of Kingdoms are not your tier 5s, they're your tier 4s. And you're going to get good results on the field. And if you're someone who can sustain deaths of tier 5s, but the vast majority of us cannot sustain tier 5s for the long term. And this is why I never bother to go up to 100 million power. And this is why I try to keep my troops count efficient. And this is why I rather kill off tier 4s than tier 5s. And this is how I see tier 4s and tier 5s in this game. For the next KVK, I'm already working on upping my troop count on the tier 4s front. All of our tier 4 infantry went out the window garrisoning. We garrisoned with archers a little bit as well. We were at a good amount of like 800, 600 before KVK started. We're down now to this. We've got about 800, 900 million dead troops, 1,000 dead troops, which is really nice. We'll be training more tier 4s. We'll be picking up more tier 5s to cav rally with, to do keeps with, to do arc with, to do events with, to barbarian with. But when it comes to severely wounded and deads, the tier 4s are going to be the ones we'll be using. What do you think about that subject? Leave me a comment down below. I'm Gekko. I'm out of here. Appreciate you tuning in. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get a notification, and I'll see you all sooner rather than later. Enjoy the rest of your week and take care. Peace.